If you want the cheapest supply to Asia
Mm.
for the production cost, it's this project.
Oh,
But what's happening now?
right.
So
That's
then,
why
if we
everyone's
skip
Qatar.
this,
Okay.
then we have Area 4. But which country is that? That's Mozambique.
Oh, okay.
Is it a politically stable country?
Mhm.
Arguable. So then let's forget about these two. Then it's already Abadi, right? Indonesia, and then
Oh,
Argentina, and then LNG Canada, and so on. What is that? Oops, Argentina is so far away. Canada is like, okay, 10 days away.
Oceania. This is Australia. over here.
Yes, some Australian project. But look at the volume. This is really like
Oh,
less
okay.
than 5 million tons a year.
I see.
So yes, what everyone's betting on, US LNG, right? It's that shot.
Yes.
Wow, okay. Now this is gonna be super interesting. That
Welcome to the Japan Energy Podcast, brought to you by Titan Greentech. Today we're diving into Japan's LNG market, which remains one of the most critical pillars of Japan's energy security. We have a very special guest today for a very timely situation that everyone is talking about. Today we're joined by Masa Odaka, Vice President at Rystad Energy Japan. He's the Chief LNG and Gas Analyst. Masa has written extensively on global LNG markets, Asian demand, and Japan's LNG procurement strategy. He was first a senior editor at S&P Global Commodity Insights for 5 years before joining Rystad Energy in 2022. He publishes articles that are cited regularly by Bloomberg, Denki Shimbun, and Nikkei. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
there you go. So yeah, let's start with the fundamentals. So Japan is the world's second largest LNG importer, consuming roughly 65 million tons per year. In Japan, well, 62% of this is from thermal power, of which 30% is LNG and about 30% is coal. These numbers, they do change a little bit because we're looking at anything from 2022, 2023, and 2024. But the most important thing of this is that LNG is still the backbone of Japan's power system. So gas is the largest single generation source of about 30%. And this is why LNG geopolitics matter, so much for Japan. So how does the market look right now, Masa, if we're looking at the LNG side?
LNG market. So basically, before the recent geopolitical tension in the Middle East, the overall consensus in the LNG market was, let's say December 2025, it was a very oversupplied market. People were expecting prices to fall, and the reason for that is because there were many LNG projects coming up. One that started was LNG Canada. There was also expectation of projects such as Golden Pass, Qatar's NFE, which is an expansion project coming up, and so on. Actually, our December monthly report in 2025 for Rystad was something like, there's never been a better time for you to be an LNG buyer, because all these projects were coming up and then prices were looking down. Even when we were looking at the forward curve, things were pointing to very, very low absolute prices. Now, 2 months later, with all this conflict, prices have more than doubled. Actually, in a matter of days. So we now know that LNG prices can be very fragile, and it is also very, very still dependent on choke points. One choke point is Panama Canal, which is the reason why most U.S. LNG from the Gulf Coast is actually making almost a world tour around the world, if I may say so. Because every LNG, or most 90-something% of LNG leaving the US, when they come to Japan, they're actually going around the Cape of Good Hope, not around the Panama. So that's one choke point. The other choke point now we find out is the Strait of Hormuz. One that often is not discussed, but let me just say it, is also the Malacca Strait on the buyer's end, because there's many ships that go through that, crude and LNG. Luckily, it's geopolitically stable now. That could become also a choke point.
Right.
Yeah, and then the Suez as well, which we saw when that ship, I think, drifted once, blocking the.
Oh, was that with the
Canal.
Evergreen?
Yes, I think something.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, but just with the Panama Canal, why is
Yes.
that a choke point right now?
I think there's various reasons, but one is drought and not enough water was one point, and then there's also priority. Like it's not that it's impossible to go through; it's just there's a very long queue. If you're like a solo show shot that has certain rights or certain passages, then you have priority. But even then, in some winters, I remember counting like what was it, 20 days, 30 days just for northbound, southbound in that small strip.
I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I visited the canal before.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
It's impressive.
Yeah. You saw how narrow it was, right?
Well, for me, I felt like everything was big. It was my first year seeing such a big canal. But then I did hear that they wanted to talk about expansion kind of plans and stuff, and maybe that was delayed or something. And then just recently in the headlines, I think it was just I think the U.S. is looking at buying the canal, bigger stake into it, and so I had no idea that's actually a choke point. That there's a long queue, or you need a special,
especially in winter.
Wow. So you literally have to travel down south.
I guess like when you're looking at anything from like a demand outlook, winter and summer, of course, those are the peak areas. But when we're also thinking about Japan's LNG demand outlook over, let's say, something like 10 years instead of only like different seasons, how do you see that outlook here in Japan?
So we expect in the 10-year time frame you're talking about from here to here, overall LNG import will go down as well as overall gas demand. Mainly the main driver for this is, or the main drivers for this is declining population, restart of nuclear power plants, and gas power plants becoming more efficient, as well as demand decline for things like industrial. But there's also some upside like AI demand centers and so on. So this could be actually something that raise things like demand for power. But the main reason is declining power demand.
I think with AI, I think that's what everyone is talking about, where with the introduction of AI, more AI usage in our daily lives, would that actually increase the power demand? But Japan also faces with the population issue, where
that's right.
You have about 1 million.
So
losing 1 million people per year.
When we talk about power demand for AI sector, or even things like Bitcoin or whatever, the condition is that they have access to cheap electricity, not just electricity, right? So that is why what we see in some regions like Hokkaido. I'm not sure how closely you follow nuclear power plant restarts, but Hokkaido, the mayor has already said that they will start Tomari Unit 3 nuclear power plant in fiscal year 2027. So we're looking at maybe like January, February, March 2028. The reason I think they decided this is because A, there was getting push from the central government, but also B, they have an incentive to provide cheaper electricity to attract these data centers and so on. Because without the nuclear power plant, what does Hokkaido Electric have for generation? It's mainly things like oil, coal, and gas. And just depending on these things is too expensive. So they need nuclear power plants to restart. For thermal, just let me comment. Oil, we will see less of. We already see less and less oil power generations within the thermal mix.
Of course.
Coal, the ones that are new will remain, but I think they will generally be slowly phased out, but be kept as long-term offline in case there's a winter spike that suddenly raises prices to 180 yen per kilowatt hour or whatever. So I think they will be there as a strategic something that they can rely on in extreme cases.
Is it because of storage of coal?
That too.
Quite convenient.
That too. Yes.
And also, I guess there's no like complete policy on coal, for instance, like coal firing when you're looking at anything from like a European
That's correct. So yes, you're right. When we look at coal to gas switching bans, Europe definitely you have to consider that because basically you're taxed a lot when you use coal.
Exactly.
Japan is still I think it might be strategic because I think Japanese government, as well as the Japan power industry, they sort of want to increase Japan's power market and become more like Europe in some ways. But at the same time, they want to prioritize energy security.
Right, but you also have a difference of like the self-sufficiency of renewables or in general of energy, right? When you're
That's
looking
right.
at
Yes.
anything from like the UK to Denmark, for instance,
Yes.
or if you're looking at Japan. So it is very difficult.
I mean, yeah,
to make that
even when
policy.
like I've lived in Germany and I did quite a lot. I followed Germany a lot. Wind, Germany, it led to things like retail curbing and power prices going negative when wind
Right.
Right.
Yes.
cuts, right?
Right.
Yes.
But that's the tricky thing about renewables, right? Yes, you can have. First of all, I think to completely do away with thermal, you need so much extra renewables capacity.
Yeah.
And then what's the run rate and what's the cost for that? And then what's the when do you get the return of the capex and so on? These things, when you consider it, intermittency is another thing, because if it's like reversed, then it's great. But renewables is usually ample when people least need electricity, and then it is very small when people need most. So intermittency is also another thing. So when I read your bullet points of questions, I think LNG plays a very strategic role in filling in the gap when there is intermittency issues from renewables.
Yeah.
Because nuclear you can't just turn on.
Right. Nuclear is going to be baseload. That's for
exactly.
Sure. That's going to be baseload. And I think LNG is either as a transition fuel or transition, but not like transition in the sense that you will stop using LNG. But
That's right.
It's going to be, as you mentioned, fill in the gaps in the background. It
might become peak shaving in 2030s, 40s. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But it might be mid-load for some price dynamics and months, but it will really depend, I think.
I just want to bring in here because you mentioned about Germany. So just looking at kind of the overview of different countries, I think Japan right now, renewables 23%, nuclear at 9%. Compared that, I think the US is you got much more nuclear, and so their kind of non-fossil power ratios at 39%. The UK more than 50%, right? So heavily in renewables. There's a good amount in nuclear. France, Germany, Italy. So France, of course, we know with EDF, a lot of nuclear. Germany, a lot of renewables. Yeah. And nuclear, probably now the trend is probably moving away from nuclear. Do you know? That's still the case.
I think right? Angela Merkel in 2011. Actually, great day to discuss that since it's the 15th anniversary, 15 years since Fukushima. But Germany, the famous Atomausstieg. So basically, to stop the nuclear fleet in Germany. But this was a bit hypocritical, in my opinion, because they can buy, cheap power from their neighbor in France,
of course,
which runs on nuclear, right?
Of course.
So they're saying, yes, we're stopping our nuclear fleet.
Yeah.
But then we're buying all this
power
from our neighbor who's generated from nuclear. So immediately I thought, okay, that's a bit interesting. They can make themselves look a bit better, but then they face all these intermittency issues, right? Wind was one. There's also, some days where there's less solar power and so on. So in a country like Germany, where the wind sometimes doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, renewables can be very tricky.
Yes.
Unless you're talking about offshore wind or, some alternatives.
Right.
Yeah. So no, that's why you definitely need to bring in more batteries or more other kind of technologies. Yes. Maybe it's hydrogen, ammonia, maybe other kind of technologies to kind of work around that.
And all these things point to bullish commodity, whether it's rare earths or rare metals or whatever, right? Because more battery investment, more renewables, they use 4 times more silver than conventional. It's called diesel cars and so on. So everything points. I'm actually personally long most of these things because it just, whether you look at the European Germany model of going more into renewables or Japan's model of still sticking to thermal, it's still both pointing to bullish commodity.
So I want to bring it back to kind of earlier you mentioned the choke point in the current geopolitical situation and the Strait of Hormuz. So maybe walk us through this graph. So
sure, this is basically
what's going on here with this crazy graph.
Showing this is from intercontinental exchange on ICE JKM. JKM is the Asian LNG index by S&P Global Platts. Basically, I've been tracking the time spread between each month since a few years ago. This one just shows the May and June spread between May 2026 contract and June 2026 contract. Both are Asian LNG prices, and the diff basically doing the price of June minus price of May. It was negative 20 or 30 cents for most of 2024, and towards winter it became a slight contango, but then the range was around within 15 cents, sometimes often within 30 cents.
Right.
But now with the recent conflict between Israel, US versus Iran, as well as many neighboring countries that are certainly aligned in certain ways, that has lifted the prompt price. So basically, the April May has shot up. To give you context, JKM was around $12, $11 before the conflict. Within a few days, on a Friday, it was, I think, $12 or so. And then by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, prices were $25 and $20.
Right.
This was because Qatar halted production and there was bombing on Saudi refinery and so on.
Yeah.
All these things pointed to, okay, I don't want any of my ships to go near that place.
Sure.
Qatar also didn't want to face tank storage overfill because of if production keeps on, then they can't store it.
They can't store it, they can't ship it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they halted production. Even if the war ends today, and let's say there's a peace agreement and everything, Qatar will take another 2 weeks to restart. From a technical standpoint, because there's many things. LNG is very delicate. You have to first cool the tank, and then you also have to get rid of the water molecules and all these things. And technical difficulties, also things like a field that it has high pressure. You close that, and then reopening, and all these technical difficulties result in at least we're looking at a month or so restart for full scale production.
Right.
So that's why we think the recent correction, basically what happens was after LNG prices shot up over $20, it's gone down. But I think that was a relief. Trump said things like, "Oh yeah, the war is ending."
Yeah.
But even if it ends, there will still be repercussions for LNG because basically 20% or so of the LNG production has halted.
Right.
And that requires a minimum of weeks to restart.
Yeah.
So that's the.
I know, interesting. So if we talk a little bit more like big geopolitical topics right now, something like this, 20% of global LNG passes near the Strait of Hormuz, right? And Qatar is the largest LNG exporter globally. So now that the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted, what will happen to the LNG markets? And a little bit of an add-on to this would be something like how important is the situation of the Strait of Hormuz for Japan? Because most of the LNG that is delivered to Japan comes from Australia, for instance. So I'm guessing more people are fighting for this LNG as well across the globe from a price perspective.
That's right. If we focus on Japan, there's actually more of a crude issue than an LNG issue, because Japan imports a lot more crude from the Middle East than it does for LNG.
I see.
Right.
So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing is, in terms of dependency, places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, India are a lot more percentage-wise exposed to Qatar. So they are, and on top of that, they are price sensitive. You see the weakness of Pakistan's currency. Bangladesh and India also, every time LNG spot prices go up, they pull their buy tender, or they don't award their buy tender because they don't want to buy expensive LNG. Considering all this, LNG that they have to procure now is very expensive. So what we see now is a situation where all the buyers, yes, they are likely going to lose the supply that they were supposed to get from Qatar, but buying a replacement cargo now is very expensive. And the middlemen, a lot of them can get away if they have a force majeure, which Qatar already declared.
Right.
So that doesn't put them at a risk in the sense that they don't have an obligation maybe to deliver to their buyer.
Right.
But the end buyer, someone like Kansai Electric, who were supposed to get a lot more LNG from Qatar this June, they need to find replacement cargoes, and that's not going to be very cheap. So that is very, very troublesome for someone like this power utility.
Certain countries as well. And yeah, even with the whole situation playing out with kind of Lloyd's Insurance and from the UK, so the risk premiums must be kind of skyrocketing through the roof. And
yes, so what does this mean? There's going to be a huge disruption for shipping. So people are very scared of becoming short shipping. In fact, all these ships that are now trapped in the Hormuz, they're there, but they can't leave. So what does that leave? No one wants to go short, but people have to deliver LNG from somewhere farther away.
Right.
So then this becomes, actually shipping rate went, like the cost, I think Argus's assessment from US Gulf Coast to Tokyo was around $1.20 per MMBTU until mid-February. Now it's like $7.
Oh my goodness!
So it's like it's
7x.
gone up. It's gone up more than the physical volume. Yeah.
Wow.
Physical JKM price. Right? So that just put things into perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because right now is end of peak winter season, right?
Yeah.
So now people slowly start thinking about, okay, we can consider shipping sunk, because it's peak winter is all over, shipping rates are coming off. But now the situation is totally different,
right?
Because shipping is super expensive.
Yeah.
There are obviously some constraints logistically. Like if you have to bring a ship to Asia anyway, then you have to consider this is different dynamics at play. But yes, so in a nutshell, what's the LNG situation? Less projects coming up online, delayed projects because of rising EPC costs. Qatar NFE, if it doesn't start on November and it gets delayed further, the so-called oversupply that was supposed to hit the LNG market in 2026 is going to be delayed to 2027, which means elevated prices for longer, which is very bad for new demand in places like Southeast Asia.
Right.
I see. Well, the past couple of weeks, we've been speaking to a lot of the electricity market professionals, and they've been super busy. Yeah. I think the market has been very volatile because of the whole situation. Also, right now, this is the season where a lot of the annual contracts are kind of at renewal stage.
Yes.
And looking at, all right, how do they price their 1-year power contract? So everyone has been super busy. How about yourself? Have you been very busy receiving a lot of calls and consultations?
Yes. Yes. Very, very busy from the same companies multiple times of the day.
Oh my goodness.
As well. Yes.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned power, right? There's still I don't think there's been enough increase in the Japan power prices. When you look at things like EEX, I don't think the power price has gone up enough to consider
to really reflect the current situation.
Yes.
Oh.
Maybe it's better that way in the sense that people are hoping that the situation will resolve by then. But whether you're looking at crude price or gas price, because I was talking a lot about Asian LNG prices, but Japan's LNG import price is more linked to oil. So higher crude is actually more percentage-wise going to have a bigger say into Japan's LNG import price. What does that mean? That means for us taxpayers, eventually, either the utilities go out of business, they pass it down to the consumer.
Right.
Well, no, talk about rising prices. We then also have the situation where this is a big topic.
Yes.
Everyone's talking about it. The Japanese yen, I think the past couple of years, it's really been weakening against the USD. I think just today it's around 158 Japanese yen to the dollar. So if we look at this graph, it's I think historically it's sort of like hovering around 80 to 100 over here, but now just recently in the past few years, it's really gone down. If we look at this, with the weakening yen, it's definitely going to be making LNG imports a lot more expensive.
That's right.
What do you think the policy for kind of the government agencies like with BOJ or with METI, do you think they're trying to control the currency to make it stronger, strengthen the Japanese yen so that these imports can be cheaper, or they're looking at maybe transitioning away and having less reliance on imported energy products?
I think a combination of both. They will try to obviously become more or less dependent on imports. That is for sure,
Yeah.
because this is about the 10th or 11th time that we see sort of an oil shock like event since World War II ended, right? So it has repeatedly shown that Japanese crude companies and power utilities and all these importers of commodities are very exposed to Middle East geopolitical situation.
Yeah.
Having said that, it also comes at a cost to diversify supply as well as build new relationships. So all of these, even for example, a company like Cosmo Oil, they have very good relationship with ADNOC and the UAE, but that's decades, if not maybe half a century of a relationship building to bring them to what they are in terms of situation. On top of that, we also have a situation where downstream retail prices often for LNG and crude oil is linked to something like the JCC, Japan's average crude oil import price. So while the government may tell these companies to diversify and become less dependent on Middle Eastern oil, it comes at a cost. And things like shale is very recent, and Japan already relies heavily on things like military with the US. Adding energy on top of that, whether it's truly diversifying risk is also questionable. So going back to your question about currency, is Japan trying to weaken or strengthen the currency?
Right.
I'm not sure, but I can say one thing. How the Japanese yen is used in the world, it also is in the medium term, maybe, or long term. Japanese yen often is a safe haven. Yes, it is weakening, and I know this because my savings are Singapore dollars and USD and all this. But there's also a way around it. Smart people try to play that as well. But more importantly, I think when there's a shock like this, people will try to hold assets. And I think Japanese yen, despite all these things that I said about being a commodity importer and having headwind when it comes to economic growth and so on, I think in the mid to long term, it still is going to be a key asset that people are going to hold on to.
Sure.
So in that sense, I think there is some resilience for the Japanese yen.
Yeah. Oh, I completely don't doubt that. I think if we look at kind of these major currencies, the USD, Euro, I think the RMB a couple of years ago, everyone was thinking that this will kind of strengthen and have more influence, but now it's just with the whole geopolitical situation. Japanese yen, definitely, I think Japan really shows that it's a very, very stable economy, stable kind of governance and regulations across the world. But I'm just wondering about the trajectory of the currency. So the strength of its currency, I think on this graph, what I wanted to point out, and this is a small little thesis of mine, which is that if we look here before the Plaza Accord, the Japanese yen actually was at around like 240 yen to the dollar. And this was right at its peak when kind of the US was worried that the Japanese economy would actually overtake the American economy. I just wonder whether this might be kind of a long-term play where if Japan were to slowly let its currency weaken, you're going to have a lot more of its strengths coming back to manufacturing. The automotive exports, your robotics exports, your key semiconductor supply chain products, your assets, your primary kind of resources for semiconductor parts. I wonder whether this is a long-term play for the government. However, if you weaken the yen too much, energy, food resources, this will be very, very expensive. Yeah.
It could be. I try, despite us talking about USD and Japanese yen exchange rate, both are fiat currencies, and I think they are fiat currencies, whether it's the NOK or euro or whatever. I think these are bearish relative goods and services in the long run. What does that mean for USD to Japanese yen in the long run? I'm not sure. But one thing we can say is that, yeah, for things like importing food and energy, this will be expensive if Japanese yen is weaker, because a lot of this will be denominated in non-Japanese currencies. But I'm also exploring the idea of the whole USD or euro or Japanese yen's current form changing, because this continued floating exchange rate is I don't think sustainable. It's very difficult to measure. It's like using a ruler that changes every day in size.
Right.
So I think that obscures things. So when I have some subscriptions where they show, for example, Japanese real estate or US real estate in each state, showing in barrels of oil, bags of rice, and whatever.
Right.
When you look at these things, it puts things into perspective.
Yeah. So what is the meaning of money?
So going back to your question, what is the Japanese government trying to do? To be honest, I don't think the Japanese government, whether we're talking about the Bank of Japan or Japanese government or Jiminto or whatever, I don't think they care as much, because they are not going to be in power for that long. If you know what I mean, their service period is shorter. But I think as an overall, like, Japanese yen trajectory, I think it's much longer than that time frame. So in that sense, I'm not sure what is more beneficial, because Japan is a heavily export-oriented country as well. So weaker yen is, yes, going to be more expensive for importing food and energy, but it's also going to be better for exporting things like Toyota, Honda, and all these things.
Your social companies.
So then, what is that? Is that going to be more important in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, 50 years?
Right.
Or Japan's import price of food, oil, and all these things when the population is declining? All these things come to play. So it's very tricky. Whether the government is going to do good, whether loose monetary policy or tighter monetary policy is better for the population, I think it's hard to say. But I'll tell you one thing. When these Bank of Japan or whatever entities try to do things from the top down, it usually has unintended consequences. And that, I think, is very difficult to measure. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's just you're going to have different parties or different companies and different people reacting differently to the market. So we'll see how it is. Hopefully it doesn't weaken too much. Otherwise, we won't be able to go on any overseas vacations.
So I think every time I go back to Denmark, it's
it's
my
right.
It's really expensive.
I mean, even Europe, right? When it implemented things like no reloads of Russian LNG, that's one example of unintended consequences, because what that did is more LNG from places like Yamal ended up in Europe, because they can't reload and sell it to other markets.
Right.
So what that meant is actually Europe importing more Russian LNG, which is probably what the European policymakers didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But they were effectively paying more of their potential adversary. So these things, it's very difficult to look at things this way. Even things like Inflation Reductionary Act, right? You're borrowing from the future.
Yes.
So ultimately, it becomes inflationary.
Yeah.
You're borrowing what was going to be used later now.
Yeah.
And that's going to penetrate the market. So eventually, it's going to be inflationary.
Oh, but I think that's what the U.S. is betting on. That technology is deflationary.
Yes.
So that's the whole thing with kind of the US. Yeah, we're borrowing money and we're kind of causing inflation right now, but hopefully technology is deflationary, so it balances out. So with all this high tech, AI, all that stuff. So I don't know. It's
No.
way above my head.
I mean, AI and all these things, technological advancement is definitely there, but I won't entirely buy into the argument, the fact that, oh yes, then I can, sit back, relax, and just put my bank money in the bank and relax. That I don't buy.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
because things are looking quite inflationary.
Right.
Yeah. Well, got a couple of kind of
Sure.
quick questions to ask then. Number one, will Japan LNG demand be higher or lower, you think, in 2035? Why do you think the demand will be coming down lower? Is it because more transitioning into renewable energy, nuclear restarts, or
Both of that, but also smaller declining population. More actually, slightly more efficient power plants. So
I
a
see.
lot of old gas-fired power plants, the low efficiency ones, they are being phased out.
Yep.
There are a lot are already going to phase out this year.
Mhm.
A lot have already are currently offline.
Yeah.
And they're categorized as long-term offline.
Sure.
Yeah. So capacity-wise, it will also go down. Of course, there's going to be new CCGTs coming up. Actually, the latest that was announced was in Okinawa, of all places. They were betting on, or they've announced that they're going to have a new CCGT in the 2030s. So yes, there is more commitment to gas, but also the old ones will phase out. So it's tug of war in that sense. But overall LNG demand, because of population decline, likely lower power demand, restart of nuclear power plants. By the way, I don't expect a full 33 gigawatts of nuclear power plant to restart. I'm looking more at like 15 to 20 gigawatts in the mid 2030s at best.
Okay.
Which is still like only 2/3 of the 33 gigawatt nameplate capacity. So with all this in mind, I think demand in 2035 will still be lower than now for LNG, but with some nuance, like percentage-wise, it might be actually higher than coal and oil thermal power within the energy mix and so on.
Right.
But according to this graph, it's not going to be in line with the METI LNG demand. Not even close.
No.
So do you think they basically overshot that? And what was the reason for that, do you think?
Basically, I think they wanted to send the signal that Japan is doing everything it can
for renewable
carbon neutrality, as well as renewables.
Yeah, but also the nuclear is going to go back to, what was it, 20-25%?
That's right. Now, of course, we might see some technological leap in things like fission energy, which Sanae Tokaichi has repeatedly said. These things is basically like harnessing a small sun, right? And if that is technologically possible, we're talking not about 1 or 2 gigawatts. We're talking about like 80 to 100 gigawatts, right? That's like 100 nuclear power plants equivalent. So if that comes to fruition, this might be like, we can forget about this.
Oh, that would be a renaissance age for energy worldwide. Yeah.
But I wouldn't entirely cross it out. However, these things are likely gonna not only face technological difficulty, but also intense lobbying.
Yeah.
That we will probably not hear about, right? Because of from all this, interests from majors and so on. So that aside, I think this is a realistic LNG outlook for Japan in the next 10 years. Why is it different from METI? Because it also is a bottom-up approach. If we reach carbon neutrality and if the carbon budget and so on in the 2050s, it will look also much lower. So I think that's the gap. That's the reason for the gap. Yeah.
Got it. And then earlier you were mentioning and explaining about kind of this equity
yes.
over here.
So what I wanted to show is basically the first thing I want to show is that first thing I want to show is Japan's LNG demand is going down. The second thing I want to show is that a lot of the LNG is actually indexed or priced in oil.
Yep.
So when we look at 2025 or 2030, we still see more than half, in fact 60% or so, are actually oil exposed. So Brent prices going to $100 per barrel is going to raise the average LNG import price into Japan more than the small spot price, small as in percentage wise, volume wise, increasing 3 times, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which is something that saved Japan relatively in the winter of 2020 to 2021 compared to Korea. Because Korea imported a lot on this red index, the LNG spot price, and because they committed at the time when we saw negative crude oil prices in certain forward markets,
Right.
when crude was tanking, when JKM was less than $2. This is when Korea said, okay, JKM is super cheap now. Let's commit to this volume for the next 3 years.
Okay.
But then what happened within 3-4 months? It went up to $20.
Yeah.
Almost 10x. So that's when Korea's import prices exceeded that of Japan. Japan, luckily, that was by luck, didn't change as much. Yeah, and part of that is because Japan also sells a lot of their gas in an oil index so the importers of LNG actually sell to their customers, their factories or their end users in a quasi oil link. So they call it natural hedging. So that's one thing I want to point out. But the other thing I want to point out is U.S. Henry Hub dynamics is gonna rise as well in the coming future. Yeah.
Why is that?
That's because there's more LNG SPAs being signed between companies like JERA and US LNG projects.
Okay.
But I'll also tell you that this is FOB, means non-destination restricted, so they can ship it to anywhere else. This graph shows roughly 50% of the US contracts by Japanese companies arriving into Japan. The reason why I say 50% is like recent past years. You look at it, some years it was higher, some years it was lower. It's a fair bet to say, okay, a significant portion will be not arriving into Japan, but it could. Yes.
So not arriving to Japan would be either reselling that or to kind of Japan's investments overseas then? Like
more
power plants overseas.
Could be. That could be in the maybe 2030 time frame.
Yeah.
But most of it now is to Europe. Because because Europe stopped importing Russian pipeline gas, they are importing LNG, and a lot of that is coming from the US.
Gotcha.
I see.
Yes.
Understood.
It's more efficient logistically. It's cheap. It's closer, and Europe LNG is cheaper in terms of tax because of the carbon taxing and all this for coal. Yeah.
So Masa, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about LNG?
That it's not LPG. That's a joke. But
okay.
Misconception is, I guess, one is that within LNG there is different gross heating value. So it's a bit like quality. In coal we have like 6,500, 3,500 kilocalories and so on. It's a bit similar to that in LNG as well. A lot of US LNG is shale, meaning that gross heating value is very low. You can maybe show, this one. So basically, that low heating value of less than 1030. This is something that Japanese city gas companies like Tokyo Gas, Osaka Gas, Toho Gas prefer not to take because it's lean. They have to. I don't want to bore you with the logistics, but for them to sell this LNG into pipe city gas, they have to spike it up, consuming LPG. So that is one conception of LNG, misconception. Another would be the fact that it's perishable. So unlike crude, which Japan I think has a 60 or 90-day strategic reserve, gas and LNG I think a reserve is, if we just talk about storage, it's only 2-3 weeks. And I'll also put like a side note on that, it has to be fridged, it has to be cold. So you can't, once LNG runs out in a tank, you are kind of screwed because then you have to go through the entire process of cooling it down and then making sure that all the water molecules leave that tank then adding methane and all this. It's called a cool down process. It's very time consuming and expensive. So that's why, whether you're talking about an LNG carrier or whether you're talking about Qatar's LNG production facility or Japanese regas terminals, they all have to be cooled down and removed of impurities and all this. So that's why I think that's another thing that how LNG is actually something that you can store if all these engineering obstacles are overcome. And we have safety is obviously one thing, and it takes a lot of energy. So yes, when people say, "Oh yeah, no, Japan has crude reserves," I'm sure they also have LNG reserves. They're quite different in that sense. It's very difficult to store LNG compared to something like crude.
Right. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Right on. So yeah, I also wanted to ask a little bit of a question here because I know that a lot of what we've been talking about has been a little bit of a negative spin on not only Japan but also the rest of the world with everything that's happening from an LNG import. But is there anything positive when we're looking at the economic case for renewables? So I'm thinking something like long-term expensive LNG. It basically does three different things. So first, of course, it strengthens the economic case for maybe faster renewables, nuclear restarts like we talked about before, more storage, grid reform, efficiency. But it can also push Japanese buyers to seek more more flexible and diversified LNG portfolios, or maybe even look at something like more resale optionality.
Yeah.
And then third, I guess, it raises pressure for policymakers to basically say it's really expensive right now when we're looking at the LNG. Anything from an FX perspective to also spikes in prices.
Yeah.
So the expensive energy is basically politically toxic in Japan. So with low energy self-sufficiency like Japan, maybe that would actually benefit the renewable side of this. Do you agree with this, or am I fishing a little bit here? Or
It could be, but one thing I'll say about renewables that actually not just renewables, I tend to think that if things make economic sense bottom up, I think that's great.
Sure.
So whether it's
100%,
renewables or new crude oil investment or LNG gas-fired power plant, whatever.
Yeah. We all want cheap energy.
Yes. So I think if the kind of renewables that is truly sustainable, doesn't require, like replacement every 10 years on rooftop or whatever, things like this, then I think it can be good for technological advancement, B, also truly eco-friendly, and something that will alleviate Japan's dependence on foreign commodity imports. So in that sense, yes, I think this is another great opportunity for us to think about, not just in Japan, but for overall primary energy consumption, right?
Right.
Pressure for policymakers, yes, but I'm not sure if they think in that long of a time frame, because LNG contracts, some of these LNG contracts are 27-year long.
Right.
I'm not sure if most politicians think in that long term. Also, current conflict is definitely not going to last that long. So I think it's hard to say whether it's bearish or bullish for renewables in that sense, because the higher crude prices are, the higher transportation cost, and the higher transportation cost means obviously more expensive for LNG and crude, but it will also be expensive for manufacturers of solar panels and wind and all these things.
That's a very good point. It's all related as well. Yeah.
So
supply
chain goes up, and EPCs are going up. Now, the wait lists on EPCs are incredible. What happens when costs blow up? This is a serious issue in LNG, because when they market it and when completion happens, and if there's a delay, who bears the cost? All these things becomes an issue. It's not a LNG only problem. It's also for every renewables, I think. So rising costs, input costs in that sense, I think is a headwind for all energy manufacturing company.
Yeah. Well, I think earlier, Masa, we were discussing, and if we're looking at kind of new technologies or renewable energy technologies with the technology S-curve, if things can get cheaper, and then if LNG cost or these prices of LNG is rising, then you will have certain countries where they're
definitely
emerging countries, they're growing their economy, their population is growing. They don't have all of the infrastructure in place yet. they will decide whether
Precisely. I agree.
to invest in LNG or renewable or
Mhm.
any other
100%.
Yeah.
So,
that's cheaper.
so yes, switching from oil or coal to gas is expensive,
The switching cost is
but
expensive.
switching from oil or coal to LNG is even more expensive.
Mm.
So gas
Okay.
and LNG is, first of all, LNG is much more expensive than gas in the sense of switching.
Mm.
Adding on to what you said, yes, if we see sustained elevated LNG prices, whether we're talking about break even long-term pre-FID LNG at $11 per MMBTU or spot JKM prices in the teens, regardless, even the perception of, oh, LNG is something very expensive can lead to things like what you were saying about skipping the transition fuel of LNG and going directly to renewables or something else,
Right.
like, I don't know, SMRs or,
Mm.
you know,
Mhm.
yeah. So
Sure.
that is definitely a valid point. So if
Yeah.
that's I think what keeps portfolio players, your Shell, your Exxon, your
Uh-huh.
Chevron, your
Mhm.
Cheniere's up at night,
Yeah.
is if LNG is sustained at a high price,
Yeah.
if there's no relief, if there's no 2 consecutive years when people are saying, oh, LNG is so cheap, I want to buy. If everyone's like, oh, LNG is expensive, I don't want to buy, then people are like, okay, if I want to decarbonize my current country and skip the whole gas, what can I do?
Mhm.
That's how people will start thinking, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And does that then mean I should subsidize my renewables investment domestically and just skip the whole LNG phase? That is a valid point.
Mm-hmm. I think this is also what Mari mentioned in the first episode,
Yeah.
where these price signals show the pain points. And if LNG is more expensive, then these countries or companies will pivot towards other technologies as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right on.
And yeah, so another point I want to mention is that the current established LNG is almost like a rich man's market, right? If some countries are being penalized for not decarbonizing quickly because they're trying to decarbonize later, but other countries have decarbonized because they've done the transition hundreds of years ago, then it's a bit hypocritical, right? Like, yes, it might be easy for the G7 countries to say, okay, you can't use coal, you can't use oil because gas is cheaper or renewables is better. But then these countries have also done that 200 years ago.
Sure.
It's the whole argument of, okay, why does the global south have to listen to what G7 says?
Right.
And so on. So
Right.
then it becomes a whole, do people start forgetting about things like COP or Paris or, all these commitment to decarbonization and so on?
Yeah. Well, I still truly believe technology is deflationary. So we have these kind of renewable energy technology that is getting cheaper. Solar is getting cheaper. There are other, hopefully, new battery technology that can have better supply chains, not relying on cobalt or nickel, lithium as much. Then, I'm still quite optimistic.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I think the current renewables, especially things like solar panel, because the recent, let's say the past 2, 3, 4 years, all this trade wars between US and China and what, that benefits China's solar supply chain, solar panel manufacturing and so on. But I think the US doesn't like that. And what they've done in Venezuela and what they are currently doing to Iran, I actually think is more thinking about China than these two countries. So it's like they're trying to, I guess, do what China doesn't want them to do. But yeah, it's really tricky because the recent few years geopolitical incidents have also strengthened some in some Chinese industries. Even when you look at things like LNG carriers, right? There are so many new builds order books on Chinese carriers. So it's very tricky. Like on the one hand, yes, you're trying to choke China in a sense, but then you're also giving the signal of saying, okay, I kind of give up on solar. This supply chain China can win,
Right.
and so on. So it also is like, is that effective? Is that really what we want?
I think the difference is the US, they really just think in 2-year policy terms. And so the Biden administration was going full on into renewable energy, and now the Trump administration is very, very different. So, Yeah, we'll see.
But that's also even Trump administration, right? Yes, they are. On the one hand, they basically sent the green light for all these new U.S. LNG projects because Biden was pausing pausing the LNG projects development. Trump unpaused it, but at the same time, Trump also said, okay, a certain number of, for example, ships have to be U.S. built. They can't, if any Chinese, ship enters, they will be tariffed and all this. So it's like, but hang on, each of these U.S. LNG projects, they can only progress forward if they find a foundation buyer. The only foundation buyer that are likely going to buy LNG in bulk, I'm talking about 10 million tons, 5 million ton contracts, are the Chinese companies. But when you send that kind of signal, Chinese companies will obviously steer away from committing to additional US LNG.
Right.
So that's like, okay, do the politicians really get it?
Yeah.
It's very challenging.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, right? Yeah, I mean, whichever leader you consider, right? There's always going to be a strong suit for that politician or not, and then they have their advisors. So yes, 2-year time frame thinking. I think it's a bit more nuanced, but yes, it can sharply change direction. And the trouble is, not only will it change direction, they will also send the signal of changing direction, but may not.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have repercussions on
Exactly
the market there.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, I think that's about it then.
Okay.
So this has been the of course, yeah. And thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Massively.
So
So this has been the Japan Energy Podcast. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, all of the different software, all the different podcast what's it called?
podcast platforms.
That's right. So yeah, don't forget to follow on all of the different podcast services and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.